Well, hello everyone and welcome to Prep 4. So in this prep, we're going to look at the difference between qualitative and quantitative data, and then we're going to see what types of things we can do with qualitative data. So we have some questions, very few this time, so I'll let you do those on your own, but you may want to look at them before we begin. But I'm going to immediately go to the tab for data types. So for each of these columns of data, then you're going to decide if it's quantitative or qualitative data. And the way that you make that decision is whether or not you could actually use the data in a calculation. If you can use the data in a calculation, then it's quantitative data. If you can't, then it's qualitative data. So as we look here, we'll begin with salesperson. So salesperson, that's text, right? So that's qualitative data. Vehicle ID, again, text, it's qualitative data. This one's interesting though. We put a V in front of each of these to sort of force it to be text. But let's say that was just a number for vehicle ID. It would still be qualitative data because an ID number would never be used in a calculation. Vehicle type, again, it's text, qualitative. Now these are numbers used in calculations: selling price, vehicle cost, net profit, and commission. So that's all quantitative data. So that's basically it. So we've got lots of qualitative to start, qualitative for all of these. And then it ends, all the rows at the end that are used in calculations, the dollar amounts are all quantitative. And we're good. Now, there still is at the bottom here something really interesting. We have two counting functions in Excel. So let's go ahead and look at those. One's called count, one's called COUNTA. And the difference between them is that count will only count things that are numbers. COUNTA will count things that are numbers and things that are not numbers. So it'll count alphanumeric. So let's see what happens as we go through this data. So if I say equals count, okay, that's the regular count, and then highlight all of these items here, and then drag that across. Okay, and what you see here is interesting because we hadn't talked about dates before, but Excel does store dates as numbers. You saw that in one of the early assignments. So dates actually are quantitative data. They can be used in calculations. You can add and subtract dates to find the difference between two dates. And count is actually picking that up. Those were counted, so quantitative data. Then these zeros here indicate that these are qualitative data fields. In other words, it can't count them because count only counts numbers. And these over here that are all 69, that's quantitative data because count is counting these fields because they have numbers. Now with COUNTA, what do you think will happen? If COUNTA counts both numbers and text, what would you expect to cross here? If you think about it, you're probably expecting COUNTA to end up with all of these being 69. Let's see if that's what happens. Okay, there's the first one. For some reason it's taking its time showing up on my screen. So that one's 69, and they're all 69. So COUNTA counts alphanumeric, count just counts numbers. All right. Now we're going to see different variations of count in the next three tabs. In particular, something called COUNTIF. Here we have sort of an abbreviation of that data, just the qualitative fields, because this unit is about qualitative data. And we've left off the others. So we have one qualitative variable, and we're going to create a frequency distribution using formulas. So we'll complete the frequency table that summarizes the number of sales made by each salesperson, and then graph the result. So first, here's our list of salespeople. And first we have to see, well, who are our salespeople? I mean, obviously there's lots of repeats in here, but if we wanted to see unique salespersons, how would we do it? And there's this wonderful function in Excel called unique, just like that, unique. And then if I click here and scroll down and hit enter, what it does is it creates an array of unique values. So these, in other words, all my cars have been sold by these 4 people. Okay, now I'm going to put those 4 people in this table. So I'm just going to put equals the first one, hit enter, and then I'll copy that down. There they are. All right, now I want the frequency with effectively the number of cars that Jill Wells sold. All right, and to do that, what we're going to do is do equals, and then we're going to say COUNTIFS, IFS, and then it says criteria range 1, criteria. So the criteria range is going to be the list of salespeople, because we're trying to find out how many times Jill Wells appears in this list. So there's criteria range. Since it is a range, I'll lock it, comma, and then I put my criteria. Well, my criteria is that that person is Jill Wells. So I actually want to click right underneath this formula, but it's in the way. So what I'm going to do instead is click underneath, arrow up to where Jill would be, and then close my parentheses. And she sold 16 cars. In other words, her name appears 16 times in this list. Now, if I copy that formula down, then I get the number of cars sold by everybody else. And I can use a sum function here to get a total. All right. Now, because we want a frequency distribution, these are the raw numbers, but if I sort of said, well, what percentage of sales does Jill Wells represent, or Ralph, or Joe, or Terry? To do that, what we do is we take each of them and then divide it by the total. And since we're going to copy this formula down, we don't want the total to shift as we copy this down, so we're going to lock the total. And we have to correct the formatting. It should be percent with 0 decimal places. So there's percent, 0 decimal places, regrade, and then we'll copy it down to here. And then in the same way that we had the sum here, we'll sum. In fact, I can just drag the sum over here. And then regrade again. And that needs to be formatted as a percent. There we go. All right. Now, the next part of this assignment is to create this graph. I'm trying to create a graph that looks like the model. This is a pie chart. And so the way that you do that, and we don't want to graph everything. In particular, we don't want to graph these percentages, but we would like to graph the salespeople and the number of cars sold. So we're going to highlight that data, go to the Insert menu, and under Recommended Charts, we're going to pick the pie chart, because that's the one that we want. All right, and we'll put this over here, kind of off to the right of it. But we want the slices labeled. They're not now. It actually has a legend, which is actually harder to read than if the slices are labeled. So we're going to go up here to the Quick Layout ribbon. If you don't see it, click on Chart Design and it'll come up. And then find one where the slices are labeled. Looks like this one. And there we've got it. Don't worry about Terry Gardner being out here. That might have just happened because we had, and you can too, increase the font size to make it easier to read. Just click on one of them and it kind of selects them all. All right, but we're not quite finished because we also need to change the chart title to sales by salesperson. Perfect. All right, now we have to answer questions about the graph that we just made. So what's the graph type? This is a pie chart. How many data series were there that we graphed? Well, just one, right? Because we highlighted just the frequency. We didn't highlight like the percentages for second data series, so one data series. What's the title of the graph? Sales by salesperson. Is there a label on the x-axis? No. So we'll say none. Is there a label on the y-axis over here? No. So we say none there too. And we're done. All right. The next two are, well, actually the next one, I should say, is very similar. So here, what we're looking at is not unique salesperson, but unique vehicle type. So how many different kinds of vehicles did we have? Looks like it's just new and used, but just in case there's something hiding in this long list, we're going to still use that unique function. So we click here, type unique, oops, clicked in the right spot. Click here and type equals unique. And then we'll look for unique vehicle types. And it really is just new and used. Okay, so then let's copy those down. So this equals new. If I copy it down again, since they're sort of positioned, so we have new and used. All right, and now we do the frequency using that COUNTIF function again. So equals COUNTIFS. And the criteria range is going to be the vehicle type. And since it is a range, we'll lock it. Comma, and then the criteria is that it's new, which is right in the way. So I'll click underneath it, arrow up to it, close parentheses. So there were 33 new cars sold, 36 used, total 69. And then if we calculate the percentage, we'll do it in the same way. We'll take each value and divide it by the total, but total, since it's going to be copied, we'll make that an absolute reference. And then format it as a percent. Copy it down. And then we'll do the sum again. And we're all set. Now we want to create this pie chart. So we'll highlight these values. Insert, recommended chart, pie. Put it off here to the right. Now we want our slices labeled, so go back to quick layout. Get the slices labeled. Probably punch those up a little bit in the side for the font so it's actually readable. And then change the chart title to sales by vehicle type. Okay, then come down here, what kind of graph type? It's a pie, number data series 1, graph title, sales by vehicle type. There's no X label. There's no Y-axis label. And so we're done. All right, the next one's a little bit harder. So if these were frequency distributions, these last two, this next one is going to be called a contingency table. Contingency table. And the reason for that is because we're gonna look at both variables simultaneously. Who was the salesperson and what was the car sold? So first we got to get our uniques again. So equals unique. And then we'll get the sales persons. And then, oops, and here equals unique. And this will be the vehicle types. All right. And for the salespeople, so equals this one. Copy that down. And I probably should have done the same thing for these, but that's fine. We've already got them in there, so we'll just leave it that way. All right, now it gets really interesting because we come back to our COUNTIFS, IFS, COUNTIFS, and you'll notice that the way COUNTIFS works is criteria range 1, criteria 1, comma, dot, dot, dot. The dot, dot, dot means this pattern can repeat. So I can do one criteria, and then I can do another, and then another, and then another. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So for the first criteria, we're going to check out the salesperson. So we're going to say the criteria range here are all the salespeople. Lock it because it's a range. And the criteria for this first one is that it be Jill, who's covered up. So we're going to click underneath, come up, there. Okay, now, why is it complaining? Because I do have absolute references here, but because I'm going to copy this also sideways, I also have to lock the column on the lookup value, on the criteria. So I'm going to lock column F17. And then let's get it to regrade. See what it's unhappy about now. Oh, I haven't finished the formula. That's why it's unhappy. Okay, so that was just half of it, because that would be all the cars that she sold. But now I want to know, well, how many of those were new? So the second criteria is going to come from this column, the vehicle type column. Lock that range, comma, and I want these only to be new, so I'll click on the new here. And on the new, I'm going to lock the row, so as I copy it down, it'll always refer to the top row of this table. There. All right, so she apparently only sold new cars. Let's see if that's true. Yeah, because 0 used cars, and then drag this down. And you can see most of the other salespeople sold a mix of both. Then I'll do my sums. Drag that down. And then I'll do sums this way as well. Drag that across. Okay. And as you'd expect, no matter if you add this way or that way, you get 69. And we know it was 69 because when we did the count A for the whole list, there were 69 cars sold. Okay, now we're going to graph this. And this is going to be a more sophisticated graph than the last one. So this time I actually am going to highlight even the column headings, not just the data. But I'm going to leave off the totals because I don't want to graph those. Insert recommended chart. We'll go ahead and pick the first one. It says clustered column, but we're just going to refer to that as a column chart. Okay, and then we'll change the title of the chart to sales by salesperson and vehicle type. And it looks like we've also added a y-axis label. So let's put that on here too. So we'll click on our chart and come up here to add chart element. And that's going to be an axis title. Well, the y-axis would be the vertical, so that'd be primary vertical. And then we'll click on it and type vehicles sold. Okay, So then let's answer the questions. What's the graph type? This was a column. Number of data series. Okay, here there's two, right? Because we were graphing not just the salesperson who sold it, but also what type of car was sold. So two data series. The graph title is the sales by salesperson and vehicle type. X label or none. There's no X label. I mean, there's a legend down here, but there's no label. But the Y label is vehicles sold. And we're done with that one too. Okay, so that one was for two qualitative variables, we could create a contingency table, effectively seeing at the point that they intersect. For example, Joe Tanner and used cars. How many used cars did Joe Tanner sell? And it's the COUNTIF function that creates that contingency table. But there is another way to do exactly the same thing. And that's using pivot tables, one of the most powerful features in Excel. So we're going to look at that next. You need to learn both. So we've shown you the COUNTIFs. Now we're going to do the same thing with a pivot table. So how does this work? This is the pivot table that we're trying to create, which is effectively the contingency table, right? Same one. We're going back to the one qualitative variable. So we're simply, how many cars did everyone sell? And here's how you do it. It's going to seem like magic if you've never done this before, but it's really cool. All right, so you click anywhere inside the table. It actually doesn't matter where inside your raw data. You go to the Insert menu, choose Pivot Table. You'll notice that it picked up the entire range, and it's telling you that. That's the entire range. Then you come over here to where you want to put it. It says Existing Worksheet. You must click in this box. All right. Then once you've clicked in that box, then you go actually click here on the sheet where you want it. And where you want it is where it says Place Pivot here. And you must click exactly in that spot or this won't work. So you click on Place Pivot here, then click OK. You get a warning that says, wow, there's something already in there. Are you sure you want to replace it? You do, so click OK. And now you build a pivot table using this pivot table builder, these fields off here to the side. And this is where, as I said, this is going to seem like magic. So we know that we want salesperson here. These rows here have salespeople in them. This says rows. So we're just going to move salespersons down to rows. The way you do that is you click on it once and you drag it down. If by mistake you'd clicked on it twice, like that, well, it's not going to, the mistake's not going to work for me. But anyway, if you clicked it and it went into the wrong box, just drag it where it should be. So this should be in rows. And you notice this did the same thing that unique thing did before, so we don't have to do unique, which is great. Okay, and then, well, we want to know how many cars were sold. So we're going to take the vehicle ID, because each car has a vehicle ID, and drag that into this sigma values box. And you'll notice it gives us the count of the number of vehicles sold just by dragging stuff. So this is pretty amazing. The headings, though, are a little off. So we're going to fix those in two ways. First, you'll notice there's a pivot table analyze, and there's also a design tab. Click on the design tab. And over here to report layout, pick show and outline form. And you'll see that as soon as I do that, where it says row labels in my pivot table is actually going to change to salesperson, which matches the model. Now, the other problem, though, is that I don't have the percentages, and I want the percentages. So how am I going to get that? Well, the way I'm going to get it is I'm going to take this vehicle ID, and I'm actually going to bring it in one more time. So, right, basically create a second column that has number of vehicles sold. It's really being a pain for me, sorry. Click, drag, there we go. All right, now you're thinking, well, that's the same thing. But there's this little option next to it, this little eye, or on a Windows machine, might be an arrowhead. If you click on that, you'll see that you have an option to show data as. Click on that, and it's set to no calculation by default, and you're going to pick percent of column total. Then click OK. And now we get our percentages, but they're not formatted properly. So click on any one of them, it doesn't matter which one. Right click and pick number format. And it shows percentage, but 2 decimal places. Wind that down to 0. Click OK. And you'll notice that we're already getting points for having done it right. But we still need to fix the column headings. So we'll click here, and this one's supposed to be called frequency. I'm just going to type right over it. And this one was just going to be percentage. So just type right over it. Okay, now we need to make this chart off of this. And so the way we're going to do it is to highlight these values. And then when we come here to insert recommended chart, it's not going to appear because pivot tables are a little wonky with charts. But the pie chart is here. So we're going to click on pie. This first pie looks just fine. And let's see where it went. Are you here somewhere? Oh, put it right on top of the other one. So I'll drag this over. And then I will have to go to the Design tab for that chart. And then on Quick Layout, pick the one that labels the slices, and then change the title. Sales by salesperson. Okay, and now what's our graph type? It's a pie. Number data series still 1. Graph title, sales by salesperson. X label none, Y label none. Okay, so we're done with that one. Now if we do a pivot table for vehicle type, which is the next tab, it's going to be really, really similar. I mean, really, really similar. Start out the same way. Insert, in fact, if you want, if I were you, I would pause the video now, see if you can do it, because it's going to be identical to the last one with a minor change, and then come back to the video, but that's up to you. So insert pivot table. All right, so it picked up the correct range for the raw data. Existing worksheet. Remember, you must click in this box before you go looking for the existing spot to put it. Otherwise, bad things will happen. And if bad things happen, just hit cancel and start again. Place pivot here. Ignore the warning because we do want to overwrite it. And here we're going to have, it looks like in these rows, it's new and used. So that's vehicle type. So we'll grab vehicle type, drag it down to rows. There's our new and used. And then the vehicle sold. Well, every time a vehicle is sold, we can count the vehicle IDs that were sold for new and used. There's the count. Remember, go to the Design tab, change Report Layout to Outline View, and that fixes this first heading. And, we also need the percentages, so we're going to grab the vehicle type one more time. Drag it down here. It looks like it's the same thing, but we're going to use this little eye or arrowhead in Windows and click Show Data as percent of column total. And then we click on any of the numbers, right click, number format, wind it down to 0, and we're getting our points. And then we just need to finish off the column heading. So this one's frequency, and this one's just percent. Okay, all looks good. All right, then we come down here, and we're supposed to make a graph off of this. So remember, when we're graphing, that's a little bit tricky. We just want to highlight for pie charts. Just make sure you highlight as little as possible for pie charts. Otherwise, sometimes strange things happen. We'll go to Insert. We know that the recommended is going to wig out on us because it's a pivot table. So we'll just click pie here, and then click on the Design tab so that we can get the pie with slices. Drag that into position. We'll increase the font here by going back to the Home tab, punching that up, and then we'll change the title to Sales by Vehicle Type. Then answer our questions. It's a pie. There's one data series, Sales by Vehicle Type. No X label, no Y label. And we're done. All right, and our last tab here, Pivot Both, is going to make a contingency table, but now making the contingency table using pivot tables as opposed to using the COUNTIFS formula. So we'll click anywhere inside of our raw data, insert pivot table. Remember to click in the box that says table range, then and only then click on the yellow square. And what do we have? Well, it looks like in rows we still have salesperson, so we're going to grab salesperson, drag that down to rows. But in columns, we have the vehicle type. So we'll grab vehicle type and put that here in columns. All right, it's already starting to look pretty good. Then we'll take the vehicle ID, put it into the sum values, and that'll count the number sold for each salesperson. And it's pretty much done, except for making it pretty with the headings. So we'll begin by going to the Design tab, Report Layout, Outline Form, and then we'll simply change some of these just by clicking on them. Sometimes it's a little hard, and typing right over. So frequency, and I think that's the only one we have to change. Yep, that's the only one we have to change. Okay, now we're going to graph it. And here you're in luck because while pivot tables are sort of weird about graphing pie charts, they're just fine when it comes to this kind of thing. So we're going to click on Pivot Table, Analyze, and this time pick Pivot Chart. So we're charting differently. We're actually charting right from the Pivot Table menu. Pick Pivot Chart. If you're on a Windows machine, it's going to look a little bit different. You're going to have some kind of cool controls on the chart. Either works. I'll drag it off to the side because it actually made it right on top of the model. And then I'm going to go to the Design tab. And notice the Design tab sort of changes to design what it is you're currently selected. Since I have the chart selected, that's why it's giving me chart design items. And I need something that's going to give me a title, so I'm going to pick that one. And then I'm going to add chart element, the axis title for primary vertical. So I get vehicle sold. Other than that, I think that's all I need. And then go ahead and label these guys. So this is sales by sales person and vehicle type. And this one is vehicle sold. Then answer the questions about my chart for points. So the graph type is a column chart. Number of data series are 2 because it's the salesperson and the vehicle type. Graph title is sales by sales person and vehicle type. X label none. X label is, there's no X label, so that is none. Y label is vehicle sold. And if it's bothering you that this didn't wrap, kind of bothers me, I'll simply actually set up the wrap text. I can either stretch out that column or I can stretch out the row to make it all fit. There. In any case, it'll still be graded correctly, even if you don't stretch it. It still bothers me, I can't see it. There we go. All right. And so now you've got all the points. You got all the points on everything. Go back and answer the questions, and you should be all set with this is higher.